Hi, this is Andy Hoffman of CryptoGoldCentral.com, the sound money blog of the 21st century, in which I write daily of my vision of the future of money, in which Bitcoin is the center of the universe. Try my free 7-day trial membership and contact me anytime at ahoffman@CryptoGoldCentral.com to arrange cryptocurrency and/or precious metal related consultations. This week's guest, in his fourth one-on-one appearance, is one of the most well-known jack-of-all-trades-like cryptocurrency experts. His Twitter feed at Ansel Lindner is must-read material, while his Bitcoin and Markets podcast is so good it was recently added to the World Crypto Network lineup. To that end, Ansel, welcome to One-on-One.
Hey, Andy, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now let's go right into it because we have a lot to talk about. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the state of the Bitcoin market, which starting with the February 6th low of $5,970, which just happens to coincide with an exactly $100 billion market cap, which, going back to my October 20th article, the $6,000 $100 billion magic numbers is the level where Bitcoin becomes investable to essentially all of the world's deep-pocketed institutions. In other words, the ultimate Wall Street put. Since then, we've seen the $11,000 level that has served as a massive trading battlefield all year come back into play, having finally been convincingly breached until the U.S. government's pathetically transparent and widely anticipated show of Bitcoin fear through an SEC publication threatening to more heavily regulate cryptocurrency exchanges. Whilst Bitcoin has recovered nicely from its February lows, the altcoin sector hasn't fared as well. Unquestionably, the manic buying of dozens of patently worthless coins, in many cases simply because their low prices yielded the perception of larger upside potential, created a bubble that not only was destined to burst, but caused investors to be far more discerning in its aftermath. To that end, Ansel, what is your current view of the cryptocurrency market, notwithstanding the impact, if any, of the SEC press release? Has it bottomed for the year? And is Bitcoin dominance in market cap terms more likely to continue rising or declining?
Market cap terms probably rising, but I'm not too worried about that. My new saying is that Bitcoin has 100% dominance because all the other things are, they're all centralized. And as we see with this SEC thing, that's a weak point, right? They're coming for, I said this for a long time, they're coming for Bitcoin, the governments, the banks, just because we've gotten away pretty scot-free so far. It looks like they're starting to crack down now. And many investors equate ICOs and altcoins to Bitcoin. And it's going to take a little while for people to figure out that Bitcoin is different. Of course, the OGs, the people who have been here for several years, they understand this, but all the new people that came in 2017, they still have to get it. Even as far as the big institutional investors, they are stuck on this blockchain thing. And when they see, okay, now the SEC is coming down on blockchain projects, maybe this space isn't cut out like we thought it was. So I don't know. A lot of people are going to have to do a lot of learning over the next 6 months.
Right. But getting back to the market in general, because we're going to talk about the SEC in a minute. Do you believe that this was simply we had a bubble because of all the money, the institutional money that came flying in at the end of the year, and it burst? And what do you know? We bottomed in early February like we do every year. Or is there something more to it that's going to make it more difficult to recover? I mean, it's obviously we need to consolidate. This was a big rise and fall.
Yeah, I think it's just regular market moves. We, like you say, we got overextended and now we're consolidating for a while. I do think that Bitcoin has entered a new phase where, like, if you look at 2011 and 12, we had and even 13, we had these big bubbles that popped and they went right back up. My kind of read all throughout last year was if we could just go up, 2x every 6 months, that would be really good. And we were on track for that until the last, 2.5 months, where we just went from 6,000 all the way to 20,000 really, really fast. So, yeah, I think that this is just typical market moves. Think about August when the Bcash fork happened. We were at 2,900.
1800 actually we got to just before the fork. There was the last minute panic.
Yeah, the last minute panic. I think, yeah, but on August 1st, wasn't it? I think it was 29 when it forked.
Yeah. Before the fork, it went to 1800 about a week before. Then it recovered to about where you're talking about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just the end of July, right? We were at 1800, and that's we've seen dramatic gains since then. So I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no market that can go straight up. Everything does need to consolidate. And yes, for all I say about technical analysis, yes, we were definitely overbought, and there were a lot of factors that caused that. To me, the biggest factor, of course, was the Wall Street money that came in January 1st. We talked about the wall of money. I mean, hedge funds typically start at the end of quarters. The biggest time of the year for them to start is the beginning of the year. And they came in en masse buying everything. And as a result, we did have some bubble-like movement that need to consolidate. So the fact that we're sitting at 10,000 or so is pretty impressive in my view. So to me, if we bottom every year in early February and we bottomed in February this year, and the fundamentals that caused this big move that we're talking about were because Bitcoin changed. As Trace Mayer has said, the pre-seg with Bitcoin is not the same as the post-seg with. The post-seg with is worth a lot more. It was being revalued, not just speculatively bid up. So I for one believe firmly that we have absolutely bottomed. But as you say, there's a consolidation period that's unknown amount. But adding to the mix of all this is our next topic of one of the factors that may have caused the decline to be a lot more exacerbated than we thought, which is today's other top story, or I should say yesterday's, buried behind the SEC, was the news that we found that the Mt. Gox trustee, meaning they're holding all of the Bitcoin in escrow because all these lawsuits are going on, sold 35,000 Bitcoin, get this everyone, between December 18th and February 5th. Now, if you look at your calendars, the day that Bitcoin hit its high was December 17th, and the day it hit its low was February 6th. So, Ansel, what do you think of this? Is this 35,000 Bitcoin a major reason why the price declined? Did it just contribute to it? And what are we going to talk? What do we think is going to happen in the future with the other 160,000 Bitcoin that the Mt. Gox trustee has?
Yeah, I think it did. It did add a little bit to it. I was talking with one of my good friends that it seemed like whenever Bitcoin was getting a little bit of traction, a little head of steam behind it in January, February, that it got pounded down. And I at the time was like, oh, you're just looking into things. There's no manipulation going on. But now it comes out that there were 6,000 Bitcoin tranches being dumped onto the market. So I do think it had something to do with it. I don't think it's a bad thing, or I don't think it's going to continue. This was bound to happen. There's lots of, like the Silk Road coins, they were dumped on the market, and I do think it's fishy though that it was market sold and not done OTC. Why they would do that, I don't know. Maybe they were even on the reverse side of the trade, and there's a lot of things to, a lot of conspiracy theory that you could get into.
Right. And God knows I do not enjoy conspiracy theories. But when you think about it, it is kind of insane, because the reason that Bitcoin moves as fast as it does in both directions is because it's illiquid. I mean, yes, there's a lot more liquidity in the market as institutions have come in, but there's really only a couple of million available for sale at any given time. So it has big moves in either direction. And the fact that someone had a size position and we're actually selling it on exchanges, likely with sell. Look, we know it's with market sell orders because we see how it trades, is insane. I mean, when I was on Wall Street, the best way to, if you had a overhang for a non-fundamental reason, that was the absolute best situation for Wall Street banks and investors, because you would go to them and say, I have a secondary offering of an investor selling for non-fundamental reasons. And what they would do is auction it off. And usually the price would go up. And I assure you, if that guy had 35,000 Bitcoin and he came to a major OTC broker, like let's say Cumberland, they would go out to their clients and say, we have 35,000, make us, bid for it. and you'd see one block of 35,000 trade probably above the market, and the price would go up. So I don't know what these guys were doing. And they do have another 160,000, but you would think that at some point they'd be wise enough to just go to OTC brokers. And even if they don't, again, people need to realize that 35,000 of the Bitcoin that were sold during this period of plunge were for completely non-fundamental reasons, likely into very strong hands.
Yeah, and it's the 160,000 now you say that they have left to sell. Well, we're watching that now. They can't just come out on the open market and be dumping things without some, retaliation, at least from the press. So I think they'll probably sell these off OTC is my guess, if they are going to. I've also heard some rumors that there might be some large bidders out there already, governments or central banks and things like that. So who knows where this could end up.
Yeah, of course. I can guarantee you that since this news came out, if they haven't gotten calls already, they're about to get calls, meaning the Mt. Gox trustee office will say, hey, do you have more to sell? We will take it off your hands. Just tell us how much and when to bid for it. So I think that this story, as you said, coming into light is going to end this. If they actually were, as it appears, dumb enough to be dumping onto the market something that is very valuable and they could have gotten a much higher price for. So next, we're going to move on to yesterday's SEC press release, accusing numerous but unnamed exchanges of, in effect, acting as unregulated, unregistered securities firms, which in reality they are, of course, although it's very questionable to say whether Bitcoin is an actual security, since no one actually sold it to anyone. It just came to be. I think we all knew the US government would inevitably express fear of Bitcoin, per the crypto audio blog I did yesterday, just as the Chinese did, and the South Korean tried to until they were stopped by public uprising. So now that the US government is out in the open, Ansel, that they are scared, first of ICOs and now of exchanges, can they actually damage Bitcoin? And to that end, is what they're actually talking about, what they're proposing, actually negative? I mean, is regulating cryptocurrency exchanges this terrible thing for Bitcoin?
Well, I think regulating the exchanges could be a terrible thing. Right now, with all of this just mania with the altcoins and ICOs, probably not. I almost feel like these ICOs and stuff were a straw man set up just for the SEC to come in and knock it down just to hurt Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin can't be attacked by these people, really. But the ICOs definitely can. So let's let this market run out of control. Then we're going to come in and smash it down, and that's going to hurt Bitcoin. It's inevitable that these people were going to come in. And hopefully, like I try to pound this home in the last couple of weeks, is that all this stuff is education. Blockchains aren't magic, and decentralization isn't just a nice thing to have. You must be decentralized, or else they'll come for you.
Yeah, and again, it's so funny because China, who arguably in the future world we're looking at will have a much bigger role, maybe even a bigger role than the US. I mean, they outright banned ICOs, and they sort of banned crypto trading. For some reason, 2 of the 3 major exchanges are still open, even though they said you are banned, you must be closed in October, and yet here they are still trading. But the impact that had on Bitcoin was for the price to go down for a day or two and then to rocket higher. So obviously people aren't too fearful of it over there. So I'm not sure why here in a country that has a quarter of the people and very little of the mining, why people would be so scared. But again, as I was writing about this morning, they didn't say we're banning crypto. They didn't even threaten anything like that. They said we're going to regulate exchanges. So what? So first of all, I take my Bitcoin off the exchange, as any smart person should. So what do I care? And then you look at what the exchanges have done. Look at the hacks that you've seen. Look at what Coinbase has done, all their collusions, and I mean all these terrible things. I don't really care if they regulate exchanges and call them securities firms. I mean, you already have AML KYC for most of them anyway. So I think really, we're just in the middle of kind of a consolidation period, and it just, people cling to any event just like they clung to the BS South Korean stuff back in January, as if like this was some big news.
Yeah, and I've been kind of building this narrative in my head over the last couple of days with this news that so Circle bought Poloniex. Now they want to cull a lot of the ICOs and the altcoins off of there, and then they're going to be replaced by these corporate offerings. You know, like Telegram and Uber just said they're going to do a cryptocurrency. The Mitsubishi Bank over there in Japan, they're going to do a coin. So it almost feels like they're trying to thin the herd a little bit and get their corporate coins going, and make a space for them. That, who knows? They might have some plans like that.
Yeah, and we'll get to Poloniex in a second, but you're exactly right. I mean, this is what Simon Dixon, he does for a living, and what he's been very vehement talking about. And I've said it before. I've said the future of financing back in September is ICOs. I mean, because I think stocks and bonds are the past. As far as investments and as far as financing vehicles, the future is going to be decentralized financing, and you're going to see everyone from governments to corporations to just individual projects that are going to be funded in this way. Just we're early on, and we're still in a stage where governments have a lot more ability to slow this stuff down, but that's not going to be the future. Now, to finish the thought about the U.S. government, what they're doing. Okay, so they're going to step up their, let's call them anti-crypto actions, but how can they actually, what kind of impact could they actually have on global demand? I mean, only 4% of the people in the world live in the United States, and at least half of the governments in the world, at least half, either are pro-Bitcoin or indifferent to it. So, Ansel, I mean, let's say the U.S. steps it up. Is it going to cause other governments going to do anything, or do other governments really not care what the U.S. does? And in the big picture, is what the U.S. does really matter at all?
Yeah, this is the regulatory arbitrage question. I do think that the U.S. can't really do much because, yeah, like you say, the startups and everybody will just flee and be in global technology that they can't really stop it. I don't know. I think they are trying to figure it out, just like we are wondering what their next step is. They're trying to figure out how to control this as well. Nobody knows what they're going to do next, but I have a feeling it's going to be negative for altcoins and ICOs, and probably end up being positive for Bitcoin. Now, every time they come out with some action, you know, it reaches the next set of people, and they learn about Bitcoin and this technology, and starts more people down this path of understanding the idea of Bitcoin. So it's even short term, I think everything is bullish for Bitcoin at this point, and probably everything's going to be bearish for ICOs and altcoins.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of like it's like a FUD totem pole. There's levels. Like we had to spend several years dealing with the scaling debate. That was the big deal. And so many headlines and stories and things that made the price go down until eventually people learned that that's not an issue anymore. In fact, I think that issue, even though we got through the scaling debate and had SegWit and the Bcash fork did not split the network, it still kept going a bit because Bcash had a couple of extra added attacks. I mean, 4, 5, 6 of them. You had the one in November, and then of course I think the one where they kind of ended their reign of terror in January, because it was so blatant and it involved Coinbase and CNBC that when they just tried it again at an Acapulco last month, didn't work. So I think finally the scaling debate is done. We're not going to hear any more headlines that cause the price to go down about worries about whether Bitcoin is going to be usurped by other coins. I think that's over, and that's kind of part of the reason I think that you're saying that for old coins, that the excitement is dying, because there's going to be no more flippening talk. Is that kind of a way of looking at it?
Well, yeah, there's going to be no more flippening talk, and all of these things are going to have to be censored, right? There is no such thing as censorship resistance for ICOs, because they have to be regulated. And Bitcoin is going to become, obviously, honestly, like I said, the dominance index is really 100%. That's because Bitcoin is really the only censorship resistant decentralized network out there. I mean, you could argue Monero, but it's just far behind, and it has its own problems. Litecoin maybe, but again, it has its own problems. Bitcoin is head and shoulders above every other similar offering, and so I think people are going to start realizing that.
Right. Real world, as I say, real world dominance is 100%. Market cap dominance is another story. And if actually the market cap dominance was calculated with like gap principles, not all this stuff with all the pre-mine stuff getting counted, it would be far higher than 40% to start with. But yes, real world dominance. I guess Ethereum actually does stuff in the real world. Actually, they absolutely do something, but no one else does really much of anything. I guess Monero does a little bit, but when it comes to after what we just went through, people are going to be looking at the sector and seeing these things and seeing, wow, essentially none of these things do anything. They're the equivalent of .coms, and at the same time, there is this centralization thing, which is an issue, which we're going to talk. Why don't we talk about it now? Because it comes back to when Money Triggs was on Adam's show a couple weeks ago, and he talked about how all the big miners were at the Ethereum Classic conference, and you realize that there's this brewing civil war inside of Ethereum about proof of stake versus proof of work, centralization versus decentralization. They got their own potential forks. They may do their own fork. And at the same time, Monero, which as much as people like it, is going to have a very contentious fork. I believe it's next week. Litecoin even had a contentious fork, even though it's hard to believe anyone thinks that you could do really much different with Litecoin. The point is that altcoins have lots of warts that are being seen right now, which is why I think that they are going. I think that dominance is destined, market cap dominance, to really ramp up this year. I mean, how do you see these altcoins civil wars? I mean, what do you think is going to happen with Ethereum and Monero in the coming years, or I should say months?
Well, I think Ethereum, anything Ethereum does can be done on rootstock on Bitcoin. There's no need to maintain a burdensome decentralized blockchain. They can just use a project on top of Bitcoin, and all their ICOs that are centralized, they can have a centralized layer 2 on Bitcoin. So I don't understand why everybody's so hyped up about Ethereum. And they're centralized, they're censored. They don't support projects that would actually make money. Like with Bitcoin, Bitcoin was used for illicit activities because it's a really good use case. Well, Ethereum, why haven't we seen a bunch of illicit projects on Ethereum? Because they don't get support from the Ethereum Foundation. So they just have backed themselves into a corner. And yes, I agree, the Ethereum Classic, we'll see with the mining war. I have a friend that has a pretty sizable amount of hash rate, and he mines Ethereum, and he's like, I don't even think about proof of stake. We're just mining Ethereum. And so who knows, there might be that fork, and everyone says no to the proof of stake. I don't know.
Right.
But all coins in general, I think, yeah, they don't have a narrative. With layer 2 Bitcoin, they just don't have a narrative, and eventually they'll just slowly go away.
Right. I mean, you have to have a viable long-term use case in whether you're a cryptocurrency or a stock or anything to keep people going. And again, when you look at the top, because when you talk about market cap dominance, it really comes down to the top tier. I mean, you can have a whole bunch of small ones move, but it doesn't really move the needle. But it really comes down to, what are Ethereum and Bcash and Ripple, if you want to call it a crypto, what are they doing? And when you look at what all three of those are dealing with, it's pretty ugly. I mean, Ethereum got so much hype. I think people really looked at it as this like big tech company, to the point where it got valued at $135 billion, which is crazy. That makes it I think it was the 6th largest tech company, if you call it a company, in the world. And it's got this kind of shaky platform, unstable, with lots of competition coming to it, the proof of stake thing, the civil wars going on. And I think people are really, I mean, they've already been massively burnt by it relative to Bitcoin. When I look at that and I hear people, you should listen to the one-on-one I did with Jack Mallers about 2 weeks ago, where, I mean, he really laces into Ethereum, and he's a coder who's got no axe to grind. he is terrified about what's going to happen to Ethereum. You know, Tone Vays, many people out there talk about it, and I just have a sense that Ethereum, you know, jumped the shark, and that there's going to be a lot of bad news coming to it. Then, of course, there's Ripple, which there's nothing to even talk about. It's a scam, and it has no use case, and it competes with governments. And then, of course, there's Bcash, which is it's dying a slow death. I mean, when you look at that, it's trading. It's at 11% of a Bitcoin now, and you realize its hash rate is dying away. Everyone realizes that it's much slower than even Dogecoin, Litecoin, Ethereum Classic do more transactions. It's you know, I think that with those three under pressure, it's going to reflect on it's going to trickle down to a lot of the altcoin sector as people look for things with use cases, and there are a few out there, but not many.
Yeah, when I look at Ethereum, you know, one of my bellwethers is if Augur ever launches, you know, because that was the first kind of big project that was announced. That was before the DAO when Augur got started, and they still don't have any users. I think they might have a couple hundred like beta testers, but it's still not launched after 3 years, and they have a lot of competition with the smart contract platforms, Cardano. What are some of the other ones? Neo, that's a joke now.
EOS, Tron.
EOS. Yeah. And so all these, they're all kind of competing with a little bit different sales pitch. So how much of the total market cap can they each acquire? Probably not very many. And especially, again, like I say, layer 2 centralized things like Rootstock are probably going to attract a lot of people.
Yeah, I have a feeling that in hindsight, what just happened in January, and it wasn't even December. You know, Bitcoin had its move in November into December. And yes, I mean, if you remember, when Bitcoin hit its peak in mid-December, which was the day before the Mt. Gox trustees started selling, the altcoin sector was actually selling off aggressively. So it wasn't even like they were taken up with Bitcoin. They were getting hammered. And then as the year turned and the institutional money came in, they came in and bought the alts. Honestly, the only thing I can remember in my lifetime that had any semblance of what we saw of the altcoins do from roughly January 1st until, let's say, January 15th or 20th is the absolute top of the dot-com bubble. I mean, I mean, in probably percentage terms, dollar amounts was more in the dot-com bubble. There was just bigger priced things. But the percentage terms movements that these things had, I mean, you're talking about total useless crap going from a penny to like $2 or $3. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And so it may well, I'm pretty convinced that in hindsight, a lot of these things, it will have been their dot-com bubble and that period, that 2-week period, but not Bitcoin. For Bitcoin, it was just a blip. And for some of the altcoins, there are altcoins out there that are going to be winners over time, but man, they're going to be hard to pick. So,
well,
yes,
I have something to add to that. I think this is a really good time for the maximalist position, because we need to get out there and educate these people. Like I said towards the beginning, is that Bitcoin is not the same thing as these ICOs. It's not the same thing as these altcoins. And we see that now. Everybody sees that now. But the newbies and a lot of institutional investors, they are like, oh man, there's nothing behind Ethereum. We just wasted all this money. Let's you know, divest from this whole entire crypto space before it crashes. We need to educate people saying that Bitcoin is different. You know, keep preaching the maximalist position. We've been made fun of for a long time, but I think that's going to turn out to be the correct position.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just looking for the quote because I was listening to Simon was on Tone's podcast a day or two ago talking about that, about the losing tracks. I was just looking for the tweet, but basically the fact is that everything I know everything is going to be priced in Bitcoin. This whole thing, once this this consolidation settles out, you're going to see all of the world's assets based in Bitcoin, not kind of like the altcoins where they're actually priced in Bitcoin, but you're going to see stock indexes, bond indexes, gold, everything start to be priced in terms of Bitcoin. And people are going to start to realize that it truly is, well, it's clearly the world, it's the reserve cryptocurrency, but that it is truly an asset class in and of itself. And for people to believe that you're going to, on a risk-adjusted basis, do better in altcoins versus the king of blockchain, the only blockchain, the only uncensorable one, is insane. Bitcoin is the place to start out and be safe and to make your fortune. And if you're going to branch out from there, you better have a core position in the king, because the king is not going away, whereas everything else might. Now, clearly the SEC's announcement is as clear of an acknowledgement of fear by a major Western power as we have seen. However, it's not just governments showing fear, but their partners in crime in the sector most exposed to Bitcoin's Amazon-like reach, banking. Thus, when JP Morgan, whose CEO infamously labeled Bitcoin a tulip-like fraud, and Bank of America cited cryptocurrency as specific risk factors in their annual filings, it couldn't be clear what's going on in the boardrooms of the too-big-to-fail banks. One of which, none other than Goldman Sachs, announced this week that its 35% owned subsidiary, Circle, is buying Poloniex for $400 million. Ansel, just how big is the actual threat of cryptocurrency to Wall Street in your view? And is there anything they can actually do to either fight off this threat or capitalize on it?
Well, I like to think about it not as, well, okay, there's two kinds of Wall Street. There's the Wall Street that we have today, and then there's the sector, okay, the industry. We'll always have a financial sector, and that will never go away. It'll actually be better when Bitcoin takes over. But the traditional system that's built on however many trillions of dollars of debt we have in the world right now, that's going away. Will we see Goldman Sachs survive? Will we see JP Morgan survive? I don't think so, or at least not in their current form. They are terrified, absolutely terrified. Banking is going to change fundamentally, and it's coming very quickly, actually. So yeah, I think I'm going to talk about this on my podcast, so I don't want to spoil it too much. But yeah, Goldman getting in with Poloniex, that is very understandable. I've been saying for a long time there's going to be a lot of acquisitions in this space. Coinbase could be next, Kraken, something like that. So we have to expect that. Banking will change within the next 5 to 10 years. We won't recognize the big banks.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said I bring this up over and over again. Back when I was in Wall Street and I was in the oil field service sector, and I was there at the heart of the internet bubble, and we were told to try to bank with internet products and internet companies every sector. And in the oil sector, at the height of the bubble, yeah, I guess people would buy into anything. But the fact is, the internet didn't affect the oil industry that much. But it certainly affected retail to the point where there is essentially no more retail. Everyone just buys everything on Amazon. And it made the industry better for the consumer, but it destroyed the industry as we knew it. Bitcoin will have widespread impact on the world, as much politically and socially as economically. But by far, the sector it's going to decimate, destroy, annihilate to the point where it'll be beyond recognition will be banking. And so you bet they are worried about it. And I believe that they will be buying actively. They will be finding strategies that involve cryptocurrency. It wouldn't surprise me if there are tokens for Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan in the future, as they realize that that's how you make money. There's no need to always be in with the government in their fiat system. If that system's dying, you go somewhere else, and fiat is going out and crypto is coming in. Let's see, I had here a question about altcoins, but I think we've discussed that in general. So let's just go on to one more topic, crypto dividends, which would have been a much better question earlier this week when the market was much stronger, but nevertheless needs to be asked. The reason being that, as I predicted after witnessing the fiasco that was the Be Private fork, it's trading in the futures markets for 0.006 Bitcoin, with, in my view, little hope, but I do have hope, but little hope of being safely split by a major exchange or wallet. Conversely, we have the Be Rhodium airdrop, which is moving forward beautifully. It does not need to be split. It will be trading sometime later this month. It really depends a lot on market conditions, how it will be valued, but I have a feeling it's going to be valued well. But just in general, I bring up these two coins, and of course you have the Monero V4 coming up. What is your view of the outlook for crypto dividends in general, be they forks, airdrops, or just related to the whole altcoin market weakness we're talking about?
I think I don't know. I follow you guys, Adam, and your channel there for all this news because it's so hard. I mean, how many forks have there been now? Bitcoin 20, 40, something like that. I think the era of Bitcoin forks might be over, and to save some of this altcoin space, they're going to start forking the altcoins. And so you have to buy, say, Ethereum to get the fork, or you have to buy Monero to get the fork. And that we could see that for a while, but it's this whole fork time, I think, is over. The next biggest thing for the space, I think, is going to be these corporate coins. They're going to come in, like I talked about Uber and all those. We could see this new era starting, but I think overall that the fallout from this big crash is going to be the forks and the alts and the ICOs, that whole sector dying off.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really kind of the end of an era of free money, because that's what forks were considered. And you know, when you said the buy something to get something, I'm not even sure if I agree with that, because I think what we just saw in this be private thing was how that does not work. I mean, they made it so that you had to essentially, yes, a Bitcoin holder theoretically should get it, even though I don't see anyone splitting it. But if you bought Z, you'd have to buy Z Classic and take market risk to get B private. Not only that, you had to buy Z Classic, not realizing that the people who created the B private fork knew this beforehand and probably loaded up on it so that they can sell it to you at higher prices. And it turned out to be a fiasco. The average person, I'm sure, based on the volume, paid way over $100 for the Z Classic, which is now trading at like $10, you know, instantaneously. And that is not a model that works either, because people lost money before it even started. And on top of that, it's a fork. And again, the free money thing, it just doesn't work anymore to just say, well, we're forking off, so we're worth money. It worked at the height of the altcoin mania, which was last fall and into, let's say, January at the latest. Now you have to have a use case. I'm going to keep repeating this. It's no different than what happened after the dot-com crash. After that, people looked at the dot-coms and said, okay, well, do you actually do anything that I'm going to pay for? And there were going to be ones that do that. I personally believe B Rhodium is one of them, but we'll see soon. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. We'll see what it's valued at, but I believe it has a long-term use case. B Private's going to have to convince people that it can compete with Bitcoin, with Zcash, with Monero, with all these other ones. And again, people don't believe for a second that you can get free money by buying something, especially buying something with Bitcoin. You hold your Bitcoin. If someone gives you something for free, that's great. You take it. You do not run out and try to get your free money, because that's not how it's going to work. It only works at the top. It does not work right now. Any last thoughts before I move on to the end here, Ansel?
It's all a learning process. Blockchains aren't magic, so hodl your Bitcoin and don't bite off on the use cases. Like, everything does have to have a use case, but it has to actually be proven. It can't be like, oh yeah, we're going to fill this niche in 2 years when we launch. You know, wait till they launch before you waste your money. And so yeah, that's all I got for that.
Right. And again, you say waste your money. It's waste your Bitcoin in reality, because to get these things, you have to use Bitcoin. And the one thing that everyone needs to learn the most is to hodl your Bitcoin. Do not give it away, and certainly do not keep it on exchanges. So with that, we're going to conclude today's podcast featuring one of the Bitcoin community's most active, prolific, and informative tweeters and podcasters, Ansel Lindner. Follow him at Ansel Lindner, and his Bitcoin and Markets podcasts at BTC Markets, actually at BTC MRKTS. As for me, go to cryptogoldcentral.com or email me at ahoffman@cryptogoldcentral.com. Thanks very much, and have a great crypto day.